New York don't slow down for anybody. It's loud, intense, fast-moving, and absolutely unforgiving if you're not ready for the moment. But as the US Open gets closer, there is one name on the entry list that is creating a very different kind of buzz, Alex Eala. She's heading back to Flushing Meadows, but this time, she isn't returning as an unknown young player simply hoping to make an impression. She's coming back as one of the most talked about rising stars in tennis, and for Filipino fans around the world, this is much more than another Grand Slam appearance. It's the next chapter of a story that started 1 year ago, and this time, the expectations are completely different. To understand why Alex Eala's return to New York matters so much, you have to go back to her first US Open main draw appearance. A year ago, Eala arrived in New York without the kind of worldwide recognition she has today. She faced a seeded opponent in the opening round, and what happened next became one of those moments Filipino sports fans could instantly recognize as special. Eala fought through a tense, closely contested match and came away with the victory, announcing herself on one of tennis's biggest stages and showing that she belonged there. That was her introduction to the US Open. But fast forward to this year, and everything has changed. The Alex Eala returning to New York is not the same player who arrived there 12 months ago. Her ranking has climbed to a career-high position inside the world's top 20, making her the highest-ranked Filipino player in tennis history. She also made history by becoming the first Filipino to win a WTA Tour-level singles title, capturing the Washington Trophy after defeating a top-3 opponent in the final. And she didn't stop there. At Wimbledon, Eala produced the best Grand Slam run of her career, reaching the fourth round and showing once again that she can compete with the best players in the sport. That run included a statement win over the tournament's defending champion, another major sign that Eala was no longer simply a promising young talent waiting for her breakthrough. She was becoming a legitimate threat on the biggest stages. Then came the North American hardcourt swing, where she reached another milestone by earning the highest seeding of her career at a WTA 1000 event in Cincinnati. Think about how much has changed in just 1 year. 12 months ago, Alex Eala entered the US Open as a player many casual tennis fans were still discovering. Now, she arrives in New York with a WTA title, major wins, Grand Slam experience, a career-high ranking, and the kind of momentum that makes opponents pay attention. But for Filipino fans, the story goes much deeper than rankings and trophies. Eala's rise represents years of hope finally turning into something tangible. It's the kind of journey that brings families together around a television in Manila, gives overseas Filipino workers a reason to stay awake at ridiculous hours, and inspires young athletes across the Philippines to look at Eala and think, maybe I can do that too. That's why her return to New York feels different. She isn't simply checking another tournament off her schedule. She's walking back into one of the most demanding arenas in professional tennis while carrying more attention and expectations than ever before. And that's where the real challenge begins. Because getting to a Grand Slam with a higher profile doesn't make the tournament easier. In many ways, it makes everything harder. Every opponent Eala faces will have more information about her game than they did last year. Coaches will study her patterns. Players will prepare specifically for her strengths. Commentators and analysts will watch more closely. And every result will be compared with the incredible standards she has established for herself during this breakthrough season. There is a huge difference between entering a tournament as the underdog and entering as someone opponents genuinely want to beat. At this US Open, Eala is stepping onto the Grand Slam stage for the first time as the latter. But there is another issue that cannot be ignored, her workload. Several tennis analysts have raised concerns about the demanding schedule Eala has faced this season. Her runs through Washington, Wimbledon, Toronto, and Cincinnati have kept her competing at a relentless pace, with singles and doubles commitments often coming across consecutive tournaments and leaving limited time for recovery. And if she advances deep in New York, the physical demands could become even more intense. Grand Slam tennis can mean playing matches almost every other day, sometimes while dealing with travel, pressure, media attention, practice sessions, and the physical toll of previous rounds. Fatigue in tennis doesn't always look like an obvious injury. Sometimes it's a step that's just a little slower on defense. Sometimes it's a return that arrives a fraction too late. Sometimes a shot that was landing perfectly a few weeks earlier suddenly loses a little precision. At this level, those tiny differences can decide an entire match. That makes physical management one of the biggest questions surrounding Eala's US Open campaign. But it is where the story gets really interesting, because Eala has developed weapons that could help her deal with the demands of the tournament: assuming her body holds up. As a left-hander, she automatically creates different problems for opponents who spend most of their careers preparing for right-handed players. Her serve can swing wide into the court, opening up angles that can be uncomfortable to read and creating space from the very first shot. On the fast hard courts of New York, where points can change direction within just a few exchanges, that kind of variation can be incredibly valuable. Her return game has also become one of the biggest areas of improvement in her game this season. Rather than simply relying on movement and defense to absorb the power of bigger hitters, Eala has increasingly shown that she can step inside the baseline, take the ball early, and immediately put pressure on her opponent. That matters because it can take away the easy service points players often use to settle into a match. Instead of allowing an opponent to dictate the opening exchanges, Eala can make them uncomfortable right away. And the US Open's hard courts can reward exactly that kind of aggressive returning. The bounce is firm and predictable, giving players who take the ball early an opportunity to dictate rallies instead of constantly being pushed behind the baseline. Her baseline game has matured, though. Eala is no longer simply a counterpuncher whose main goal is to absorb pressure and wait for an opponent to make a mistake. During some of the biggest wins of her season, she has shown a growing willingness to take control of points, redirect pace, change the direction of rallies, and move forward to finish points at the net when the opportunity is there. That evolution is a huge part of her breakthrough. It helped her reach the fourth round at Wimbledon. It helped her win her first WTA Tour level singles title in Washington. And now it gives her another set of tools to take into New York. But the big question is whether she can maintain that aggressive, controlled style while also managing the physical demands of another Grand Slam after such a grueling stretch of tournaments. That uncertainty is exactly what makes this story so compelling. This isn't a simple feel-good story where everything is expected to go perfectly. Nothing is guaranteed at a Grand Slam. The draw is packed with players capable of producing their best tennis on any given day. An opponent could identify a weakness. Fatigue could arrive at the worst possible time. A small drop in movement, concentration, or shot execution could completely change the outcome of a match. That isn't pessimism. It's simply the reality of professional tennis. Even players carrying tremendous confidence and momentum can discover just how quickly things can change at a Grand Slam. But there is another side to this story, and it's one Eala has already demonstrated throughout the season. When the pressure has increased, she has repeatedly found ways to rise to the occasion. She arrived at Wimbledon and produced the best Grand Slam performance of her career. Then she went to Washington as an underdog and left the tournament as a champion. Whatever physical fatigue she carries into New York, she also brings something she didn't have a year ago, a much deeper belief in herself. She has now experienced what it feels like to play under major pressure. She knows what it feels like to beat elite opponents. She knows what it feels like to lift the WTA trophy. And she knows she can compete on the biggest stages. That experience matters. So does resilience. The combination of months of high-level competition, growing confidence, and the very real physical questions surrounding her schedule is what makes Eala's US Open campaign one of the most unpredictable and fascinating storylines to watch. For Filipino supporters, though, the uncertainty doesn't reduce the pride surrounding this moment. If anything, it makes the journey even more meaningful. True support was never about guaranteeing a championship. It was never about demanding perfection from every match or expecting every tournament to end with another trophy. Filipino fans have followed Eala through the difficult moments and the incredible highs of her breakthrough season. They watched the journey, not just the numbers. And her return to New York, regardless of how far she eventually advances, is already a powerful symbol of how far Philippine tennis has come. A year ago, Eala's presence in the US Open main draw was itself a historic moment. This year, she comes back carrying something much bigger, expectation, hope, and a level of national attention that very few Filipino athletes across any sport have experienced on American soil. Every match she plays in New York will be watched not only by tennis fans, but by people across the Philippines and around the world. Fans will check scores between work shifts. Some will stay up late to watch live coverage. Others will constantly refresh updates just to see how Eala is doing. That's the weight she carries into this tournament. And it's a level of attention she has earned. But Eala's US Open return isn't only about her. Every time she steps onto a stage as prestigious as Flushing Meadows, she brings greater visibility to Philippine tennis as a whole. Her success can help the sport grow back home. It can inspire young athletes to see professional tennis as a realistic path. and it can introduce Filipino talent to a global audience in a sport where that recognition has historically been limited. Whether she wins or loses in New York, Eala is helping build something bigger than the result of a single tournament. That's why her return to Flushing Meadows deserves to be viewed as a defining moment in her career, not simply another line on a results sheet. Alex Eala's US Open return is the collision of extraordinary opportunity and a very real physical challenge. She's walking onto one of tennis's biggest stages with the momentum of a breakthrough season, but also with the accumulated toll of an unforgiving schedule. And honestly, that combination is what makes sports so incredible. There is uncertainty, there is pressure, there is resilience, and there is always the possibility that something completely unexpected could happen. As the tournament gets closer and the draw begins to take shape, the questions only get bigger. Can Eala manage her body well enough to reproduce the level of tennis she showed at Wimbledon and Washington? Can she handle the increased attention that comes with no longer being a surprise underdog? And when the tournament reaches its most demanding stages, can she find another gear, just as she has repeatedly done throughout this season? Right now, nobody has those answers. And that's exactly why her US Open campaign is so fascinating. These are the questions that will define the next 2 weeks, and they're also what makes this one of the most anticipated Grand Slam appearances of Alex Eala's young career. But there is one thing we already know. Alex Eala is returning to New York as a fundamentally different player from the teenager who first stepped onto the US Open stage a year ago. She comes back with a WTA title on her resume, historic victories over some of the biggest names in the sport, valuable Grand Slam experience, and a level of confidence that can only come from repeatedly proving yourself when the pressure is at its highest. Whatever happens over the next 2 weeks, that transformation has already happened, and it has already become part of Philippine tennis history. So now I want to hear from you. Can Alex Eala handle the physical demands of this incredible season and make another memorable run at the US Open? How far do you think she can go in New York? Drop your prediction in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of Eala's journey back to Flushing Meadows, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick with us for more in-depth US Open coverage, WTA news, and the biggest Grand Slam storylines. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update as Eala's tournament unfolds. Thanks for watching, and we see you in the next one.